Jesus had finished all his sayings, in the hearing of people, he entered Capernaum. A centurion there had a slave whom he highly valued, and who was ill and close to death. When he heard about Jesus, he sent some Jewish elders to him, asking him to come and heal the slave. When they came to Jesus, they appeared to him earnestly, saying, "He is worthy of having you do this for him, for he loves our people, and it is he who built our synagogue for us." And Jesus went with them. But when he was not far from the house, the centurion sent his friends to say to him, "Lord, do not trouble yourself, for I am not worthy to have you come under my roof. Therefore I did not presume to come to you, but only speak the word, and let my servant be healed. For I also am a man set under authority, with soldiers under me. And I say to one, go, and he goes, and to another, come, and he comes, and to my slave, do this, and the slave does it." When Jesus heard this, he was amazed at him. And turning to the crowd that followed him, he said, "I tell you, not even in Israel have I found such faith." When those who had been sent returned to the house, they found the slave in good health. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. If you'll bow your heads with me. Lord, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in my sight, Lord. Amen. So I am back so soon. I'm excited to get to talk to you. I normally don't get to preach so close to each other. It was only 2 weeks ago, so I'm back. Hopefully you won't be bored of me yet. If you are, try not to fall asleep. And it's exciting to come to you on Memorial Day. It's an important weekend for us to take time to stop and to remember those that have come before us and made sacrifices. So I think it's pretty fitting that our scripture today is about a Roman centurion who was a soldier. Soldiers give orders and they get followed. It's stuff that happens. They're used to it. They get things done. So that's exciting, but that doesn't always work that way in real life. So we're going to take a quick survey. If you have ever given an order to a child, or maybe someone who works underneath you, only to see that order wasn't accomplished later on, raise your hand. So everybody that has children, no offense children, it happens. Mom pointed at me, I've done that before. So it happens to all of us. It's a part of life. It's part of reality. So it makes sense that even in this story, Jesus is amazed. And this has always been part of it. So this is even back to the days when I was a teenager. So I'm going to tell a story. Back when I was a teenager, a few days after high school graduation, I had a big leg surgery. I had a tumor in my leg, and they had to take it out. And I waited until a few days after high school graduation so I could walk across the stage. And they knocked me out. It was a really big surgery. I was knocked out for hours and hours, and some complications happened, and it was a big old fun time. And my mom was with me, my dad was with me too, but I remember my mom staying with me through the night. And the nurse was pretty great to start with. I was an all-liquid diet, so they got me what you expect, ice chips and Sprite, right? And I enjoyed those, and those were fine, and I was kind of in and out of sleep. But then, after a while, I eventually kind of came to and realized I was really, really hungry. Just really hungry. So my mom contacts the nurse and says, "Hey, he's really hungry. He can't eat anything except liquid, so bring him Jello." So the nurse is like, "Okay, great." So they go off. And we wait. And we wait. And we wait some more, only for nothing to happen. So my fierce protective mother, who's worried about her sick son, goes to the nurse station again and says, "Where's the Jello?" And they're like, "Oh, I'm sorry, we forgot to place that order." So, she didn't kill them, so that was good. So they placed the order, and it must have been during a nurse's change, so because no one had come. But we wait, and we wait, and we wait some more, and finally, praise the Lord, here comes the nurse with one of those trays. Everyone knows it has that little dome on top, right? And they place it on my bed, and we're like, why do they need a dome for Jello? Why can't you just have a thing of Jello in your hand, one of the little packs? And they place it on my bed, and it rips down, and the nurse is really excited. He's really excited to take care of me being hungry. And he looks like he's about 2 weeks out of nurse's school. So he reaches down, takes off the dome, chicken fingers, French fries, a roll, some dessert I can't eat, an entire plate full of food that super hungry Travis is not allowed to eat. And now at this point, I can't speak if this is fact, but I imagine in my head, because I was kind of out of it, that my mother, who has been a teacher for years, looks at him with that look that only teachers can give, and only moves her mouth about a quarter of an inch to say something like, "He can only eat Jell-O." The nurse grabs the tray and slowly backs out, not wanting to turn his back on my mother to potentially be attacked. He pulls out of the room, and within moments, we are left with as much Jell-O as a human could possibly eat. So it took a while, but we eventually got the Jell-O, and eventually got what we needed. And that's the way life is, right? Sometimes you have to give orders 2, 3, 4, 5 times before something gets done. Communication is hard, as Pastor Catherine talked about last week. That's no different today, just as it was back 2,000 years ago. But the incredible thing is the centurion believed and trusted Jesus. And this story that we read today is really amazing on a lot of levels. But let's do some background first. Jesus had just finished his Sermon on the Mount. It's a little bit different as it is in Luke and Matthew, but they're similar. Jesus finished this giant sermon that would define his ministry, that would set the course and the path and the things that he was going to do. And from what we read, it's pretty clear that Jesus was already known for having healed people. So this Roman centurion, and so some more background, the centurion was a Roman soldier who commanded about 100 people. He was probably a career army officer, and he probably worked for Herod, because at that point no Romans were stationed in the Holy Land except under the clients. And it's amazing to note that he's friends with some Jewish people, because that's really unusual. If you remember my sermon a couple weeks ago, I talked about how broken that society was, and how separate people were. That Romans didn't associate with Jews, and there was actually laws that helped prevent that. But somehow these people had formed a friendship between the two of them. And it probably helped that this centurion donated money to build a new synagogue, and that helped build them trust and all that. But this relationship is still pretty amazing. And this man would probably be considered a God-fearer. That's the name that Jews would give people that believed and followed their God, but of course they couldn't really be a Jew because they weren't. And so he was forced to follow this religion from a distance. He couldn't go to the same temples, the same synagogues, he couldn't do all the same tasks that they could, but he still had a desire to learn about God and to trust God, and that's really astounding. And what's important here is that he cared about Jewish traditions, and this is something that doesn't really mention here, but there was a Jewish law that if this man had Jewish people in his house, the Jewish people would become unclean, because he was a Gentile, and Jewish people weren't expected to enter a Gentile's home. And so if they entered, they had to do all this stuff to become clean again. So it's a big mark of the Roman that he told Jesus, "Don't come under my roof, I'm not worthy." Because he didn't want Jesus to become unclean. And that's pretty considerate, and it's amazing that he cared for his servant and for himself enough that he still wasn't going to let Jesus come in. But then on the opposite side, it's pretty amazing that if you think about Jesus, left what he was doing. He was going to travel to this man's house and enter the house of a Roman and becoming unclean to heal somebody. And it's astounding that Jesus was willing to do that for a non-Jew. It says a lot about who Jesus was. This shows that Jesus was willing to serve everyone. Willing to visit centurions, willing to help Gentiles. The soldier simply asked Jesus to make it so. And he talks about faith, and he talks about trust and orders. And that's incredible, so incredible, that Jesus says he hasn't found faith like this anywhere in Israel. The centurion could have not had that faith. We assume things are going to happen, but let's remember, he could have just thought those rumors of Jesus healing people were just rumors, weren't true. I mean, we've heard of rumors of spectacular things, and most of us just assume it's not true. He could have worried that even if the rumors were true, that Jesus would reject him and say, "No, I'm not going to help a Roman." He could have worried about that. And then finally, he could have also worried that Jesus had to place his hands on the person to actually heal. But he didn't worry about that either. Again and again, through these questions, the Roman had faith. He had faith that Jesus could do it. And he ignored his worry and fear and had faith instead. And that's why faith is a big deal. It can take us places. And faith is a word we throw around a whole bunch. Many of you maybe have decorations. I know I have a little word faith somewhere on a bookshelf in our house. It's a thing I got for a wedding. Faith looks good on banners or in stained glass windows or on screens. And stuff like that we throw around a lot. And we treat faith usually like it's a one-time thing. Oh, do you have faith in Jesus? Yes. Check mark. All right. But faith is more than that. Faith is a daily choice. Faith is something we have to own up to and make a part of our lives. When we talk about faith, people like to bring up doubt. It's really common. But I think doubt's not a problem for me. I think we all question. I don't know if you do, but I've questioned at different times in my life. Doubt's a part of life because we're made of humans with brains and we sometimes struggle with that. I don't even think Jesus has a problem when we doubt. But I don't think faith, or doubt, excuse me, I don't think doubt is the opposite of faith. Because a lot of people make it seem that way. I think fear is the opposite of faith. Fear. And one of my favorite preachers in talking about fear once said, all sin starts with fear. Let me say that again. All sin starts with fear. Now that will get you thinking. Maybe fear of losing control. Fear of not having enough. Fear of people thinking that we are less, or fear of actually being less. Fear for our children. Fear for our spouses. Fear for our friends. Fear of struggle. Fear of pain. Fear of life. Fear of death. And maybe the biggest, fear of the unknown. Fear of the future. Fear of tomorrow. We are faced with this fear every day. We are afraid all the time. And the world is so good at telling us to be afraid. They are so good at telling us we need to be afraid of everything. You see, if you're on social media or watching the news, you get giant headlines of fear. Trump is going to be president. Be afraid. Hillary is going to be president. Be afraid. Our country is changing. Be afraid. Our church is changing. Be afraid. Immigrants are coming. Be afraid. Our climate is changing. Be afraid. Be afraid. Again and again, we are told to fear life, to fear the future. Just watch social media, watch the news. There's so much that we're told to fear. It's no wonder that we're always afraid. And we struggle with sin because we live in a scary world. We are told and again, our future is something that we have to fear. The hard thing is that bad things do happen, as I was talking with the kids about. So we see that there's plenty out there that's worth being afraid of. We all know people who have lost their jobs. We all know people who have had children that struggle in life. We have friends that have struggled through broken relationships. We have all lost loved ones. We have all found life difficult or even impossible. We've all experienced things that make us want to go back to bed. Or we've seen people experiencing things that are even worse. And so fear is always there, ready to grab our heart and not let go. But fear doesn't have the last word in this life or in the next. You see, I have been blessed with an amazing family. My grandfather's name was Pappy. That's what I called him. That wasn't his actual name. That's what I called him. He was one of 3 children, and his sisters were Nan and Nell. Nell outlived both Pappy and her sister Nan. She was the oldest. Nell outlived her husband of over 60 years. She outlived all her cousins. She outlived all her friends. In the last few years of her life, she often wondered why she had outlived them all. She no doubt feared being lonely and feared the struggle of daily living. She could have feared that pain every day. But instead, she had faith in God. After her younger sister's death, she no doubt wondered why she was still here. She could have feared life more than most of us fear death. But instead of approaching these emotions with fear, she had faith. And the quote that she had that still sticks with me today is that in that circumstance of fear and worry and pain, she said, God must still need me for something. God must still need me for something. A woman of over 90 years old could have said, there's nothing left for me. I have served God my whole life and I'm done. I'm ready to give up. But she believed that God still had a purpose for her. She believed that she didn't know the future, but she knew God did. And she said, God still needs me for something. And that's an incredible level of faith. And when she did pass away at 95, we celebrated a life well lived. A life lived with faith in God. Because she said yes when the world told her to give up. Looking at the unknown, she had faith instead of fear. Because faith is saying yes when the world tells us to say no. The centurion said yes to sending his friends to talk to Jesus. He said yes to believing that Jesus would answer and believing that Jesus could help. When the world would have said, don't worry about that. Jesus would never help a Roman. And even if he would, he's not going to come in your house to your servant. So don't bother. The world tells us, he told the centurion, and the world still tells us today, that fear has the final word. Fear says that you are not good enough. Fear says that you will fail. Fear says that you will fail at work. Fear says that you will fail at your job. Fear says that you'll fail at school. Fear says that you will fail your family. Fear says our church will fail. Fear says our lives will be a failure. Fear is always there, ready to grab your heart and not let go. We feel it all the time, the questions in the dark of the night. But faith is about believing in something else. Believing that God is by our side. Believing that God is with us and we approach life as the creator of the universe. One of my favorite quotes of Dr. Martin Luther King, and he has lots of good ones, is that faith is taking the first step even when you don't see the whole staircase. Dr. King could have feared the civil rights era. He could have said all those hours in prison, those hours faced with hate and vitriol, could have been worth nothing. He could have believed that all would have failed because people were saying it would. He could have believed his choice of nonviolence would have failed because people thought it would. He could have believed again and again failure was around the corner. But he believed in something bigger. Instead, he had faith. Faith is taking the first step, even when you don't see the whole staircase. Faith is something we choose every single day when we wake up. We choose to not let fear control our hearts, but to trust in God. We choose to believe that the one who created us, the one who gave us life, and knows our innermost being is by our side, helping us through everything. And I'm sorry, friends, bad things are going to happen. We can't protect ourselves from the brokenness of our world, but we can know that we are not alone. That God is with us, and as the children reminded us, we have each other. And I would rather approach a broken world that way than with fear. Because fear can ruin our lives and prevent us from enjoying the good gifts that God has given us. Faith is taking the first step even when you don't see the whole staircase. It's easy to fear the future. It's easy to make that choice every day to look at it with fear. But faith is an action. Faith is looking for God's good work, even when it's hard to find. Faith is looking for how God will use us and use you, just like Aunt Nell did. Faith is not easy, but faith is there to call us to something more. And let me say that again. Faith is not easy. And it's okay to struggle with that. But it's about every single day making the choice to try. Faith is making the choice to believe in God's future. Because faith is taking the first step even when you don't see the whole staircase. And so today, may we pray for faith, something we often take for granted. May we pray, may we dream of a bold faith, a faith that takes us up staircases we never imagined. May we dream of a place that God will be taking us that's only in our wildest places. May we trust God and follow God and pray every day, because we have no idea those staircases God may take us to. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.